And welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And good to have everyone. Good to have Golda back today. Great. All right. And we'll go into the screen share right away. So we left off with an open question. Lauren, do you remember the question was, or the issue that we were discussing yesterday?
Do I ever?
Okay, go for it, please.
Well, I mean, we were just basically talking about the issues of sexual morality and the issues of nature versus Torah law.
Right.
I mean, that's it's not, you can't do it that's a simple version, but you can't talk about it in a simple way.
No, there is no way to talk about it in a simple way. And sadly, it becomes very emotional, sometimes very quickly, and it's very tough. It's very tough. I think, the thing that I read that I thought was sort of helpful, this is years ago, I was doing some reading, and it made, and I'm trying to think of the correct term for it. Okay. That Judah, there's the issue of to what degree do we believe in determinism? And to explain determinism, it means that basically we are created in such a way that we can't help being the way we are, and there's nothing we can do about it. That human beings are created with the particular DNA and other kinds of character traits, and sexuality being, and sexual orientation being one of those things, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it would appear that the Torah basically says that's not true, that is a kind of enslavement, and that being able to be mindful over these things and being able to engage, may we call it a battle against what's one's predispositions, is actually the very issue of being a human being, and that's what liberates us. And the arguments that we use nowadays in terms of our sexual choices, etc., would not necessarily be considered valid in previous generations and in other societies. Having said that, and I would say that also I do feel that it's terribly important to allow every individual to try and sort these things out. And that I also hold on to the fact that if it's between consenting couples, that people need to figure this one out for themselves, that we all struggle to some extent with these issues. And I don't want to be taking people's lives and doing the kinds of legislation that we're seeing happening around us right now. I think that it's in some levels a personal kind of issue, and I know I've said a lot, so I want to pause a second. Lauren, you may have some response, or whoever, to what I'm saying, and let me sit back a second and give you a chance to do that. If no one's going to respond, go on.
I mean, I don't really have much to say to you so far, but there are definitely people in each religion that support their religious laws being the law of the land.
Yes.
And in various lands, and
Right.
that's always posing difficulties.
Understood.
For a number of reasons, because religious laws themselves are up to interpretation and are complex.
Right.
And they're dealing with people who are even more complex.
I hear where you're coming from, and I agree with you. It's very complicated, because societies we can't judge all other societies by American society, and the relationship of religion to that society is also complex and deep, and how the kinds of assumptions people make in that regard. It's definitely a big subject. I don't know that I'm really equipped to handle it well. in the space and period, and whether or not in the space of this particular class. So if you're comfortable, let me go on, and we'll keep moving with the text. And if issues come up, we'll try and do our best to deal with them, if that sounds like a good proposal. So okay. So here we read this verse already. It's interesting that Rashi does not have any comment about this at all. The one little issue that I would deal with, since before we move on to another verse, is the word to'eva. We've talked about it. My sense these days is to describe it as disgusting and to translate it that way. There is an interesting and somewhat famous drash about that word, and it's right down here. And this is I'll read it to you. It's here in the Torah Tamima. To'evahi. Amar le Bakara ben Kapara la Rabbi. Bar Kapara said or asked Rabbi. Rabbi, of course, is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And he had a question to ask him, and that is, my to'eva. He says, what exactly is to'eva? What do we mean by to'eva when the Torah describes this as to'eva? And it may be Bar Kapara was the one who was actually answering this question, because it doesn't say Amar le Rabbi, but that Bar Kapara was responding to an implied question, or perhaps Rabbi asked him the question, but I believe this is Bar Kapara's answer. To'eh ata ba. You are making a mistake. To'eh means to, so you notice how he's taking to'eva, right? He says, you are making a mistake regarding it, which is a very interesting interpretation. Now, there's a lengthy Torah Tamima commentary on it. I've looked at it. I don't know that I feel a need to go into it deeply at all. The one thing I seem to remember from what he says is that what mistake, with it, and what is the it? And I believe that the it is the issue of the Yetzer Hara. That is what we translate that as evil inclination, at any rate, and to say that you are listening to the advice that your impulses are giving you, and that's the mistake you're making, that you're giving in to your impulses, which is very different from the word disgusting, right? There may be some connection to it, but regardless, it is an interesting comment, and I thought you might find that interesting in terms of the fact that there's some question on the part of our early rabbis as to what this word means too. Okay, so let's go on with that. I'm going to continue. All right. Uvachol behema lo titen shchovtecha l'tam'a ba. We've had this phrase before, right? It says, and with any a cattle, but it means animal, right? Lord, you shall not give your seed to Lauren. You had the Chabad translation, right? But to
I
become
don't have, I mean, I'd have to leave the
it's
Zoom to
okay,
turn on Chabad because I have my phone.
no problem. I remember what it is. It means to
But
become filed through it. In other words,
I,
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just saying that, to what you referred to before in using the word evil impulse, I
Mhm.
still would
Mhm.
have a huge problem with saying that, that two gay men who have a total loving, committed, long-term relationship and wanting to make physical pleasure being a part of that in various ways, I have a problem seeing that as evil.
I understand that. I really do. I don't feel it's for me to judge it right now. I'm simply trying to understand what the Torah is saying about it, and then obviously trying to make it something that I feel is appropriate. Again, I wanted to point out that it refers strictly to the act of coition. That's it. But then that
Yeah,
act is
but
prohibited in many other cases as well. Okay,
but
within
but
the
you
Torah.
it's lines like these though that drive people away from religion,
I
period. I
know,
know
I
that's
know.
throwing the baby out with the bathwater,
Yeah,
but
I
because,
understand.
as you said, it's so emotional and they disagree with it so strongly, they
Yeah,
don't see how it could come from God. And if it comes from God, God can't be good. That's the way people think. And
yeah.
that's a lot of people are driven away from religion, away from the Torah by lines like this.
I understand. I understand. I understand. I have no argument with you at all. So the best I can try to do is not to try to deny it, not to try to pull it under the rug, but to try to say we need to keep an open mind about this. And it sort of comes under what I think it was, I don't know if it's Akiva or Hillel, who says, never say you'll never understand. Someday you may understand. Um, I just know that this is sort of a an issue, right? Who is the determinant of what's right and what's wrong? And accepting the Torah as being right is a great act. It is a great act, and it involves personal sacrifice. But on the other hand, perhaps someday we'll understand that some of our attitudes regarding sexuality are actually self-destructive. Um, but I agree with you, Lauren. It is a reason why people either put down the Torah or make a judgment about God. And you either say the Torah is helping you understand the divine better, or you say you understand the divine, or your society is telling you how to understand the divine, and the Torah is out of date and inappropriate, etc., etc. Um, I agree. I this all I can try to do, and I do try, I think you know that, is to try and show how we can misinterpret the Torah, or there are ways of understanding the Torah that help us. Because my basic place is that I do trust the Torah. I do believe it's a source of truth and wisdom. But then, of course, there's a distinction between it being a source of wisdom and truth and how people or how I choose to understand it. And it's a lifelong journey. But I also do think that some of our attitudes regarding sexuality at some point we may discover are actually self-destructive. And remember, I also think that as a tree of life, it's trying to teach us how to become immortal. And that may not be important to people. I think people have basically given up on it or resigned themselves. And in that case, the question is, what value does life have ultimately beyond, temporary pleasure, which is, I think we'd all agree. I think you'd agree with it as well. That's not what life is about, you know. And
Oh,
perhaps,
well, then the rest of us who are
uh,
past bearing age must give up sex, right?
no, no,
I mean,
I don't believe that's what it's saying. No, Golda, yesterday I said that the tradition is not seeking celibacy. Okay, it just doesn't want to put sexuality and the act of that kind of act of intimacy as being a human a right, and an entitlement. It's saying you have to deal with it very respectfully, and
well, yeah, other religions have taken it that way,
I know,
exactly that way.
but I explained yesterday that if a man does not, first of all, a wife, let me say this, and I'm going to use the word, is entitled to her conjugal relations. That's the position of Judaism. That if a husband denies his wife without good reason, right, her conjugal relations, it's one of the things she's entitled to. It says, She'erak sutav onata lo yigra. That's the verse. He may not withhold from her, right? I think it's basically her clothing, and I'm not sure. I have to think about what an onata would mean. The acts of intimacy.
Hmm.
So it's not only about procreation, but it does have to do with, it does appear to be uh, limited to those acts that have the potential of procreation, of legitimate procreation, and also not trying to wind up with children who don't know where they came from, you know.
Because
And
remember,
yeah,
according to the text, also some wombs are opened up and much later in life.
yes, that's right. That's right. No, so I don't think there's any question about that. Okay, let's. So here now we're talking about having relations, carnal relations with an animal, right?
Yeah, I think we need to put some asterisks in Torah, or at least other versions of when we put it out there. Just say we have that there are other teachings that have addressed this and where to go, like a link.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's just like we need, yeah,
Well, and
so
again,
that
it's
you can see what has been written since then and how it's been interpreted
right.
in the 2000 years since then.
Mhm. Yes. Let me
Hmm.
let me finish this verse.
Okay.
So there's a man having carnal relations with an animal, with a female animal, and here, interestingly, it goes on to say, and a woman, the isha lo ta'amod lifnei behema, a woman should not stand before an animal, lirivah, in order to have carnal relations with her. Tevel hu, it's considered depravity. So again, we know that people are capable of any kind of expression of sexual behavior. And the Torah doesn't try to shrink away from these particular things. And of course, it reminds me of a sort of a joke about the person who refused to read the Torah because it gave her too many bad ideas. So, at any rate, there we go. So here's the word tevel, right? Tevel, who? Again, a word that's not common. Lashon, uh, I'm looking at this kadash maybe or kode. It doesn't, there's no vav here, okay? So I don't have vowels here, okay? Maybe kadesh, but here the word kadesh, which means to separate off. Here the context, in a sense, because we have the word kadesha, which refers, that's a word that refers to a prostitute. Uh, some say it refers to a ritual prostitute. But anyway, he says what he's saying is that the word tevel is associated with immorality. The erva, again, has to do with nakedness, right? The niuf, adultery. The chen, and here we go. This is a quote from Isaiah 10:25. By the way, Safaria has it as a reference to Jeremiah, and it's incorrect. It is Isaiah 10:25. Api, it means my anger, al tivlehem. Okay, or I think it is tivlehem. My anger is over their depravity. So again, yesterday I tried to contextualize the what is behind all these kinds of laws. Let's see if there's any more Rashi on this. Yes. Okay. Davar acher, another interpretation. Tevel hu lashon blila. It also may have the association and the connotation of mixing the irbuv. You see the word erev there, meaning to mixed, right? Mix, and in this case, irbuv is a confusion, right? Being mixed up. Irbuv zera adam, in other words, the mixing of human seed, zera bahema, and animal seed. So that's he's working hard on the word tevel and trying to understand it. So let's go on. Okay, here we go. Al al titma'u bechol ele. Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways. So again, there's this notion of the human being created in a pure form, and the idea of us using our lives in which to actually to retain that purity and also to perhaps even improve on it, right? To develop it. And the idea is that we don't know where we came from, right? We came from what is assumed to be a place of immortality. And this life is a place where we can either determine whether we continue on to the next stage of immortality or we bring our existence to an end. And the Torah is as that tree of life, supposedly a way in which to retain that purity, and that purity is associated with immortality. So I think that is the sort of underpinning of what we're looking at and what is prompting these particular laws. So anyway, ki bechol ele, because in all of these ways that have been mentioned, nitma'u hagoyim, the nations defile themselves. Asher ani meshaleach mipnechem, which I am casting away from you. Now, here's the thing. It's true. I mean, again, we get into all these kinds of issues right now, but the implication is that if the Jewish people or the Israelites behave in the same way, they're going to get the same treatment. And incidentally, there were certainly exceptions, and in fact, I finally came across an earlier passage that made it very clear that if somebody from one of those other nations was not behaving that way, they were not supposed to be driven out. So these are just general statements. Vatitma haaretz, the earth, right? The land became impure, right? Ve'efkod avona aleha, and I visited its iniquity upon her. Our relationship to the very soil that we live on and how our behavior can have such an effect. And of course, we recognize that, especially these days. Look at this expression, V'taki haaretz et yoshveha. So I think it means so that the land vomited out its inhabitants. It's an interesting perception of the relationship that people have to the land on which they live. Ushmartem atem et hachukotai, and you should guard my statutes, right? The chukim, remember, are laws that do not necessarily have a rational basis to them. Ve'it mishpatai, and my judgments or my laws, mishpatim, are laws that are the basis of human society, that allows human society to function. And so we have chukim umishpatim. V'lo ta'asu, so that you do not do mikol ha'to'evot. There we go. From all the to'evot, I'll leave it as untranslated, right? But it means these mistaken practices, if we're going to use Bar Kapara's definition, right? And let's keep going. Ha'ela, these. Ha'ezrach, both the Ezrach, which means the Israelite, v'hager hagar betochachem, and the stranger, literally, who dwells among you. So it means whether you're a born Israelite or you're someone who has chosen to attach themselves to the Jewish people. Here, v'lo taki haaretz, so that the land not vomit you out. Well, excuse me, that's kafchet, so it's over here. We are not going to deal with it yet. I'm going to assume that it's in its proper place. And it goes on to repeat this, right? It's trying to appeal and reach out to us. Ki et kol ha'to'evot ha'ele, for all these to'evot, asu anshe haaretz, the people of the land performed, they did, asher lifnechem, which the people of the land before you, right? Meaning who you're going to come upon. It doesn't mean time-wise. It means in terms of people that they haven't met yet. But titma haaretz, and again, it repeats this idea that the land became impure. The Lord taki haaretz. So there is the repetition of that idea, so that the land does not spew you out. Etchem, you. But tama achem ota, when you defile it. Kasher ka'a et hagoy, as it vomited out, spewed out the nation asher lifnechem, the nation that is before you. And of course, we know what subsequently happened. So I think that in some ways is part of the Torah's greatness, is that it doesn't paint a picture of the Jewish people, of the Israelites, as if they never do anything wrong and that they're perfect and somehow better than everyone else, except in very specific senses in terms of the opportunity that they have. So we had the Rashi lo taki etchem. So it says Mashal Levin Melech. This can be compared, right? It's a parable to the son of a king, a prince. She'echiluha davar mius. They fed him something disgusting. She'ein omed ba'amav, which he wasn't able to digest. Literally, it means which does not remain in his innards. Ella maki'o, but rather he vomits it out. Kach Eretz Israel, and the land of Israel is similar to that. Eina mekayemet, it is not able to sustain ovrei avera, transgressors. V'targumo, and the Aramaic translation of this is velo teroken, right? So it, in a sense, teroken means to be voided. It has to do with emptiness. Lashon rikun, okay? In other words, this has the meaning of to empty out, right? Merika atzma mehem. It empties itself out from them. Ki kol asher yaseh, because anyone who performs this, who does this, mikol ha'ta'evot ha'ela, from all these to'evot, v'nichretu ha'nefashot, those souls will be cut off. Ha'osot, who do, mikerev amam, from the midst of their people. I know this is exactly, Lauren, what you're referring to, is the kinds of things that make people angry and turn them off, etc. But it's there, and trying to be able to relate to it without necessarily judging it, and trying to also maybe see what is, what's it's attempting to do.
Well, I had a thought though, because
Yeah.
there were times in tradition
Yes.
would interpret paganism to include things like Christianity or Islam or and, and about
I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
and
Oh, I'm so sorry, you're breaking up. Still breaking up.
okay, sorry, bye.
Oh, really? It's just not working? Okay, I'm so sorry.
But doesn't
Apparently
this
not if
work this?
you can't hear me.
No, this is better. I can hear you
Yeah.
now. Go ahead. Try again, Lauren.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that there were times are maybe you still can't hear me because I
No, no,
was
no.
trying again.
No, no,
Can you
no.
hear me?
I can. You're
Yeah.
coming through clearly. Go ahead.
Okay. There were times that been translated paganism to include Islamic and Christian
Right,
practitioners,
right.
and then recently that has softened. And can you turn that back on so I can hear? So then um it's possible that one day that line about ways of lying down with a woman, there may be other ways to interpret the plurality of that word that haven't taken into a hold into tradition yet. I'm just saying that sometimes traditional interpretations do evolve.
Right. I think that's true. At the same time, there's such a broad scope of interpretation, and of course the Talmud and even the Mishnah and Midrash, preserve the disagreements of interpretation. And Maimonides, in his introduction, I think, to the Mishnah, talks about why these distinctions are preserved. And the answer that I recollect him giving is so that if you come across a community that isn't practicing the way you're practicing, but is in fact practicing according to these other recorded traditions that are in disagreement, you'll know that they're still part of the overall group of what we would call, Jewish or Israelite or whatever. So it's possible. I don't know, but I think the point you're making is a good one. I personally do not look down on Christianity or Islam or many other religions that clearly have the idea of one, you know, of one ultimate transcendent being, you know, and find ways in which to serve that being that may be different and distinctive. But yeah, Golda, did you want to say
But
something?
part of
Yeah,
but
was
it,
there a warning? Is there a warning also, with the same idea as we've had before with things you're not supposed to do? Like, you have to remind people 2 or 3 times beforehand to remind them that that's not something you're supposed to do, or is it
Yeah,
something that you can, if it's not observed, you can't really be judged by that? Is it? I
oh,
don't know. It's
okay. That has to do with a situation where you're actually going to have a court that's going to take action and where you're trying to determine, as we do nowadays, by the way, what the intention is of the guilty party or the party who's being, or the
right.
accused. And that is a way of determining whether or not they realized that what they were doing was wrong, because obviously there's a difference between intentional, you know, what your intention is, and intentional violation as opposed to unintentional violation, and the consequences are quite different. So that if it's, generally speaking, especially in the case of Sabbath breaking, that if your intention, you were not aware, it came out of a sense of some kind of level of ignorance, that in fact you're given the opportunity to totally correct it through the bringing of offerings of sacrifices. So I don't want to get
so
into more. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I just think that the interpretations of Christianity and Islam
Mhm.
has partly evolved, partly
Mm,
because the behavior of Christianity has
mm,
evolved.
yes.
And if we're not under their thumb to the same violent extent that we used to be,
Yeah.
then we can let up on the demonization. And the thing with, if you have Orthodox gay people who
Hmm.
are, you know, practicing in every conceivable way and moral in every conceivable
Right.
way, but trying to maintain
Hmm.
a healthful, natural family life,
Right.
maybe that can evolve as we understand things differently and their other interpretations of certain lines can happen.
It's possible. The point, though, of course, is that there was a detestation of any kind of expression of homosexuality, and it was assumed that it was biblically supported, and I don't think it is. I think when you examine the verses themselves, it's very limited. And the idea of two people of the same gender being in love with each other and maybe finding physical ways to express their affection for each other is not prohibited by the Bible. It's not, or the Torah. It is the one act that is prohibited. And of course, that I absolutely, you know, it could be that at some point I'm going to revise that particular position, and, you know, on the basis of people who are far better scholars than I am. Uh, but I think already just this whole attitude that people have had, which has put down and really and truly persecuted people that choose that kind of lifestyle, is not supported by the Torah. That's a point I do want to make. So whether or not that helps, I don't know. Maybe I will be judged myself for that, but at least I'm trying to look at what appears to be the evidence, at least that I have it in my, you know, available.
Do you
Uh,
want to finish
Yeah,
the last
was
one
going
so we
to say
don't
we're
have to
so
do this
close.
next year?
I know. We're so close to this, right? We're so close to
Right.
end this, right? So let's just. I don't think we did this, so please forgive me for going over. So hanefashot haosot, right? This, right? It said, we read the verse. Those souls that do this, that practice this. Let's see. Here we go. Let's see. I'm looking for a Rashi, and I'm not finding it. Uh,
Weird.
this is telling you Hagam. Maybe this is. Oh, right. Hagam Shehi Ketuvah B'Parshat Kedoshim. Right. It's also written in the Parsha of Kedoshim. Michol Makom. Right. Nevertheless, no, this is not. This is something else. I'm sorry. I don't. I don't. I don't see the Rashi on this.
That's all it is.
And it could be that it's on the next down here. Here it is. Here it
Yeah.
is. Hazachar v'hanakeva b'mashma. We're talking when it says nefashot, souls. The implication is whether it's male or female, right? Doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Either way. Onwards. Ushmartem et mishmarti, and you should guard my, literally, the watching, right? My it's hard to translate. Maybe we'll have to look at the Rashi here.
I have
Right?
charge.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. That's good.
Okay.
Thank you. So my charge, livilti asot mechukot hatoivot, not to perform these statutes that are toevot, asher na'asu lifnechem, which were done before you, in your, like in a sense it says in your presence, but it means, it's referring to the people that are coming up. And what this fact that it's saying this, right, and calling them chukim, means like arbitrary behavior, right? Deciding that this is okay to do. Velo titamu bahem, so that you do not defile yourself through them. Ani Hashem Elohekechem, I the Lord am your God. And to finish up the Rashi, right? Thank you, by the way, for that translation. Ushmartem et mishmarti, and you shall guard my charge. Lahasir beit din al kach. In other words, that the courts are warned to take action, right? V'lo titamu bahem ani Hashem Elokechem, so that you do not defile yourself through them. I, the Lord, am your God. Ha'im titma'u, it says, so that if you in fact do defile yourselves, ani Elohechem, I am not your God. I'm not your Elohim. You can't call me your Elohim if you're not willing to do this. Va'atem nifsalim me'acharai, and you are pasul means I'm again struggling for translations, but it means something that is not. Oh, so sorry. I'm struggling to remember. Golda,
Valid.
invalid.
Mhm.
You are invalid from following me. And so, what benefit do I have in you? Va'atem mitchayvim kliya, is since you are going to be chayav means to owe, right? Kliya, ending. In other words, you're going to have to be um, you're going to,
Obligated.
well, no, the kliya is extirpation or
Hmm.
extermination, something like that. Lachach ne'emar, and for this reason it says, Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am the Lord your God. So Lauren, it's like we build and build and build the very material that you said, tragically turns people away from Judaism, you know. So it's tough. It really is, because if in fact if the Torah is in fact true, and it's trying to warn a person, it's like saying to someone, if you, this may be a bad example, but if you continue to smoke, you're going to get cancer and you're going to suffer, and it's going to cause terrible trouble. And the reaction to that is, stop trying to boss me around. Don't tell me what to do,
It's
you know and it's a struggle. And the example you gave of Orthodox, who in every other way struggle with these things, I feel God is ultimately the judge, and it's not for me to judge them. And the truth is, I know for a fact of
and there's no such thing as gay cancer. That's an unfair analogy.
I didn't say.
Safe sex is,
Yeah,
possible.
Lauren, you're misunderstanding me. You're misunderstanding me.
I'm just saying,
I'm not.
I'm
I
not
wasn't trying to
I don't think
suggest.
I'm
No,
misunderstanding
no, you are. I'm not trying to say. That wasn't what I was trying to say. I was merely
the
saying.
analogy.
I understand. Okay. I'm sorry if the analogy was a bad one. I was thinking more in terms of, if in fact the consequences are disastrous. Okay, that's all in the most. I was just trying to give a simple, a specific example, but where you're talking to someone and you're warning them that if they do this, okay, the consequences are going to be disastrous, and the reaction is, don't tell me what to do. Okay, and there's anger, and this is very human. It's very human to react in that way. That's all I was trying to say. And I put an if in front of that. Okay? Maybe the results aren't disastrous. The Torah is suggesting that they are. And a person has a right to disagree, you
The
know.
current interpretation of the Torah is suggesting that they are, is what I would say.
Yeah. But remember what I did say as far as, loving a person of the same gender, that the Torah is not saying.
I'm referring to the act
Right.
that is commonly expressed in loving relationships.
Okay. So again, maybe, that's how we feel these days. And I obviously I do accept that. But
Like we feel differently about Christianity and Islam these
yes,
days.
I hear you. I hear you. Okay, let's stop here. It may not be a good place for me to stop, but I have to. So I'll stop the share. And thank you for whatever patience you have given me. And if you still want to talk to me, okay, or learn with me. Okay, thank you. Take care. All right.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Stop the recording.